What's going on YouTube? Culturedog back here as promised with my Q&A video. And I thought about doing this live, but the whole kind of impetus for starting this Q&A video is to give the chance for the people that don't watch the live streams to participate and watch this. And I thought if I did this as a live stream, then maybe they also wouldn't watch the replay of that. So let's just do this as a proper video. And I'll definitely be doing some live streaming soon because I've got a bunch of new like Blu-ray and LP and Laserdisc grabs and pickups that I want to share with you guys and just generally talk nonsense or whatever. So let's do the Q&A video separately, and then I'll do it as a premiere. And assuming it all goes right, unlike the last premiere I did, I can chat with you guys live while it's going out. So yes, it's Q&A time. So I got a bunch of great questions. Thanks to everybody who wrote in, and I'm pretty sure I got them all. So if I didn't, I apologize heartily, but leave a message below and let me know that I dropped the ball if I didn't cover your question. First up is Trey Stevens. Do you have Interview with the Vampire 1994 and Lost Highway 1997 on Laserdisc? And the answer is a decided yep. Interview with the Vampire is actually a very nice release. Nobody really talks about this movie that much anymore. Mostly because, vampire movies became a big thing and then just kind of zombies took over. And I don't know, this one, people still love classic vampire movies, but the 90s, stuff doesn't really get talked about that much. But, at the time this came out, it was very contentious because there was Anne Rice fans that were pissed off that Tom Cruise was Lestat, and it was just a lot going on. There was a lot of buzz about the film, so it's really interesting to watch it now, kind of divorced from all that. But Brad Pitt, Antonio Banderas, Stephen Ray, Christian Slater, interesting stuff. And Neil Jordan did an interesting job with it, but it's a gorgeous Laserdisc. I do show the gatefold in my pickups video, I think, or do I? Did I get a copy? I would show you the gatefold, but it would involve taking it out of this, and I'm feeling lazy right now. But it is a gorgeous gatefold and a nice AC3 Dolby Digital score. Elliot Goldenthal did the score, and he's freaking awesome, and I highly recommend picking up every soundtrack he did. And then, so it's a very nice disc. Sounds great and looks great. And it's funny, we were just talking about this online too. Lost Highway is a difficult movie in terms of cinematography anyways to capture on home video, because on NTSC analog video, something like this, or videotape, you've got so many opportunities for chroma noise and just the murkiness of the film to come through incorrectly. And then on DVD, you've got so many opportunities for macro blocking and horrible digital artifacts like the original Japanese DVD, because the bit rate wasn't enough to support the depth, the artistry of the film, because there's so many. This is something that could really benefit from HDR. And Lost Highway, it's a beautiful, gorgeous film. But there was released multiple times here in the States from Polygram, and a lot of these are rotters, even though it's a gorgeous jacket. It's difficult to find a clean copy. So there was a repressing, and I believe the repressed version has a better print run. You might have to do a little bit of research to figure out what you've got. But there's also a Japanese release as well. That's very nice. But if you can find a clean copy of this, I definitely recommend it. Shoutouts to Vincent Onorati, who hooked me up with this. But Interview with the Vampire I bought back in the day. I think I got that from Columbia House Laserdisc Club. And the other question was, would you say the Star Wars 1993 big black boxes were $250 brand new? And the answer for that is the reverse of yup. Nope. When it came out, yes, that was the price tag. Sometimes it would go $300 and over, depending on where you bought it from. But the Definitive Collection box set is a very cool set. But one of the great draws about it now is it's not that expensive, because it was super, super common. And that was the one that usually everybody, if they were going to go for it and go broke, even if they weren't rich, and waste a couple paychecks on one Laserdisc box set, it was that Laserdisc box set. So rich people and poor people alike seem to have that in their collections. And as these collections are either being given away from people who have passed away, or just people are giving up on Laserdisc and moving on to high definition, these Definitive Collection boxes are showing up everywhere. So definitely under $100. Depends on where you get it from. The last time I sold a copy, I sold it for $50. But between 50 and 80 isn't unheard of. But yeah, you can get it even cheaper too, depending on where and when and if the moment is right. But I'd definitely not recommend paying $250 for it or selling one for $250. So unless you're planning on time traveling back to 1993. So yeah, there you go. Damn Fool Idealistic Crusader dropped in with 2 comments or questions in the comments. One, most underrated or unfairly maligned 80s album and film. And that's tough. Album, I'm going to go with Devo's Oh No, It's Devo. It's funny because Devo is an interesting band in that prog heads and ambient fans like to overly praise Q&A, their first album, because Brian Eno touched it, essentially. Well, I personally feel that the Devo vibe and sound really was cemented later, and then by the time Freedom of Choice came out, that was like the perfect mixture of the weirder kind of vibes of Devo and the little less experimental, and the pop sensibilities of the future Devo. That's like ground zero of like the perfect Devo. It's Freedom of Choice. But everyone pretty much agreed at the time after New Traditionalist came out that Oh No, It's Devo was the total jumping of the shark. It was the end of the band's not really good. And then Shout, which came out after, wasn't even worth buying and all this stuff. But I love Oh No, It's Devo. It's fantastic. And the drums, as unrealistic as they are so powerful. And it's one of the heaviest albums ever. And it was a bummer because I picked up the CD that Infinite Zero put out, which was a label Henry Rollins was involved in, and kind of giving a new life to classic acts or things that had fallen through the cracks or hadn't been issued. And so it was out, and I think there was a New Traditionalist release they did too. But I picked up the Oh No, It's Devo one for like between $1.50 and $3 at Circuit City in this bin. And I remember reading the liner notes, and it was so sad because it was like both Rollins and Kim Thale from Soundgarden were talking about how important Devo was, but the entire thing was just Devo, but not this Devo. Yeah, Devo, but not this album. Yeah, Devo, but and I hate when they get someone that may love like a certain director or an artist or something to talk about something on a particular film, and it's just them talking about some other film or how they love that, and they don't like this one thing, and it's like, find the freaking person that loves this one thing and get them to write those liner notes. Because I was like disappointed, and I wanted to throw it across the room, but I didn't, because it was my CD of one of my favorite Devo albums. It is so freaking heavy, and the tunes are just killer stuff. They're upbeat, but they also have that dark sensibility buried within them. It's like I said before in a bunch of my other videos, I was talking about how the 80s, there was that kind of nuclear threat hanging over everything, and there was that kind of core of snarky sarcasm and danger like buried within even the most poppy of Devo songs, and that album was rife with it. But there's this one tune called She's Out of Sync that, like, in my head, I always hear like a Jeff Buckley version of that. I think it would have ripped. Like, imagine like Jeff Buckley's live Eternal Life, but him doing it, She's Out of Sync. Anyway, so I'm talking way too much about this Devo album, but my dream goal someday is to get a super group with Dave Grohl on drums and maybe like Josh Homme on guitar or somewhere, and just do a badass, like, hard-hitting Devo cover band with, like, so like essentially like songs for the deaf era, Queens of the Stone Age, but Devo songs, and just really punch in drums and get somebody to really express like how tough those songs really are. So there you go. That was the longest ass answer to that question. For film, it is really easy to go with stuff that people love now, and my answer probably will be something that people love. Because Dune is obviously up there, because David Lynch aficionados hate it, David Lynch hates it, Frank Herbert aficionados hate it, but now they kind of don't, and it's kind of come up in its own. But I'm gonna go with Halloween 3, because there are still enough people that actively hate that film, and it's amazing. It's the most Carpenter-esque out of the series besides the Carpenter original, and Tommy Lee Wallace being so connected with Carpenter and having Carpenter doing the score and everything like that, it is, Halloween 2 is Carpenter sleepwalking through screenwriting, and it's just, there's throwing stuff at the wall. But Halloween 3 has an actual vision, and just the fact that they got Nigel Neal to do an early draft, so it's got like one foot in this cool, like, British genre, like old school British genre material, and then the other half in 80s slasher cinema. It's got so much mood. It's got Tom Atkins, man. Tom Atkins is the dude, and now people generally acknowledge that, but back in the day, not so much. But there are people that still hate that film because it's a lack of Michael Myers, which is completely ridiculous. It's fantastic. It's my second favorite in the entire series, and Halloween 3. And cheers to Christian Hanna Horror if you're out there, because I know this is his favorite Halloween film, and I totally understand why. So there you go. That's the answer. All right, what's next? Dane69 asks, can you talk a little bit how best to watch Laserdisc on a projector, best setup and all? I'm going to buy a projector. What specs are important? And I believe there was some other projector questions as well. So we might revisit this further down the line. It's tough because there's a couple different factors at play. It's, are you going to get a projector just for Laserdisc and old standard definition video? Because if that's the case, then you can start dabbling in 4 to 3 projectors, and you can get some crazy old projectors. Or if you want to get really crazy, you can contact Kurt Palm and get into CRT projectors and go down that route. And there's a lot of different things you can do. But if you're going to be dabbling in a bit of everything, then you're going to have to deal with a modern projector if you want to mix LD with HD content. So, and then that starts this whole other train of questions as to how modern are you going to get. Are you going to be trying to do 4K? And now there's even like eShift 8K projectors coming out there. And then how much do you want to spend on this as well? So there's a few different things going on here. DLP can look pretty punchy with Laserdisc because DLP has the on-off contrast power behind it. So if you are going to go DLP, probably follow in Laserdisc home theater's footsteps and get an old like Runco or something like that, and that'll do you pretty fine. I am one of the people that are susceptible to the rainbow effect from DLP projectors, so I've never personally bought one, but I've definitely been involved in plenty public screenings of LDs on DLP, and it can be pretty satisfying and punchy. Somebody's jamming out and cruising next door. The more modern you go, there's different solutions. Even if you're going like just 1080p, I still prefer Elcos for LD. I like LCD stuff. I didn't mind watching. I used to have a Sony Cinesa 3 LCD projector, and I didn't mind watching LD on it. But I definitely prefer Elcos, either Sony's SXRD or the JVC DILA variants of liquid crystal on silicon. And you can get some older projectors that are 1080p really cheap. There was a JVC 1080p that was going for like a couple $100 not too long ago on eBay. And there's some newer options. If you want to go 4K, there's some native 4K projectors that are pretty expensive. There's some shifting eShift 4K projectors that are out there that are a little more affordable. And yeah, there's some 8K stuff on the horizon. JVC's been dropping some big bombs lately where they're going to have like software upgrades for HDR, and so yeah, and HDR gets a little confusing with projectors too, because it doesn't have the natural like on-off contrast as a lot of flat screen displays. So it's a whole complicated world. But for LD in particular, if you're going modern, I definitely would recommend a JVC or Sony if you can make it happen. And if you don't mind getting stuck with 1080p, you might be able to find some smoking deals out there. But yeah, otherwise, if you want to go DLP or something, yeah, I could just get like an older Runco or something like that. But yeah, then there are still like a ton of options out there. And if you do get something new, you're going to have to find a way to scale it or something. Though that said, all my Sonys have composite plugs right in them, and they look pretty good. They've got decent internal scalers and comb filters and stuff. So you don't necessarily have to go out of control getting outboard video processors like Lumigens or Crystallios or anything like that. You can if you want to, but they might have some proper plug and play with it. And most of these projectors should at least have rudimentary zoom options. So my Sony has a zoom that that just fills the image side to side, but then scales it to maintain the actual ratio, so you're not losing anything top and bottom. If it's a letterbox Laserdisc, it's going to just get pulled to the sides, but then pulled top and bottom to maintain that ratio. And it looks pretty good. So, and I sit like maybe 12 feet back, something like that. So I don't sit right on the screen. So it's very forgiving for any kind of artifacting from the processors or from the Laserdiscs or digital artifacting from transferring analog video to a digital domain. But yeah, so it's definitely there are definitely a lot of factors at play there. So your results may vary. So yeah, feel free to reach out if you have any specifics in mind, and maybe I can help out further or point me in the right direction. Some other people that can help out. But yeah, so I would definitely suggest trying to just try and plug it in directly and see how that works. And then if that you feel is insufficient, then you can start chasing down video processors or something else to kind of mix into the signal chain. Yeah, there you go. Projectors. The Lock asks, what's the craziest, most unique item you got signed at the convention or an in-store appearance? And sadly, nothing that crazy or unique, though I do have a couple options here. Because most of the time you just get the product, signed, the album signed, or the movie signed or whatever. And there's some kind of things I love that I've got. My parents got me Arkham Asylum hardcover signed by, I used to think it was in Boston, but they actually went to Southern Connecticut to get Grant Morrison and Dave McKean to sign in silver Sharpie my Arkham Asylum. And so I love that. And then I've got a photocopy of when Rob Zombie signed my arm, but people sign body parts all the time. That's not that weird. So I think probably the most unique is I got Jimmy Doohan to sign my Tony Hawk skateboard at a Star Trek convention in the 80s because I was just going there. I was low on money and I was like looking for anime bootleg dubs with my buddy Karsten, but I was just more into going. My dad wanted to go to the con, and I'm like, yeah, I just want to go hang out with my dad and maybe get some skating in the parking garage. So I was keen on carrying my skateboard around everywhere I went, because that's kind of what I did at the time. I was always had my Tony Hawk, and this was when they were doing the Bonite, which was interesting new skateboard composite wood / graphite or whatever they had mixed in there, and it was really susceptible to water damage, so you could never leave it outside or skate in the rain or anything like that. So it was kind of an interesting idea gone awry, but yeah, it was the one with the hawk skull. So I'm like, well, I guess I can't not meet Jimmy Doohan, that'll be pretty cool, but I didn't have much money on me at the time. I was a teenager and in high school, and I might have had my first job at that time, so I was more in charge of my own destiny, and it cost everything just to get into the place. These creation conventions, I used to call them back in the day, were way pricey. So by the time you hit the dealer's room, you were already broke just getting into the place. So I was like, well, I got my skateboard, so Jimmy Doohan signed my skateboard on the tail. And the cool thing was that it was so not illegible, but so interesting looking that you could easily say that it was a Tony Hawk signature as well. So tons of people, I'd be like, yeah, it's Tony Hawk's signature, and then it was really Jimmy Doohan's. And if a Star Trek guy came in, I'd be like, oh, that's a Jimmy Doohan signature. So there you go, James Doohan signed my Tony Hawk skateboard. Punk Nerd says, can you mention the MP3s I gave you in a video? Also, can you shout out my Green Day 1234 channel? Yes, Green Day 1234 channel. And yeah, thanks for the MP3s. again, I'm more of like an old school like 80s hardcore LA punk scene guy, but you know, I can appreciate some Green Day action. And yes, I did see them live once with my nephew at the Hartford Civic Center years ago. So yeah, appreciate the action there. And yeah, Green Day 1234 channel, check them out. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Damn Fool Idealistic Crusader also had a special message. Share, y'all. Who's up next? So yeah, that goes before the lock. Shout out to the lock as well. Legends of Cherry Hill, and check out he's got a killer YouTube channel. Stefan Hamburger. What's up, Stefan? I'd love for you to talk about some of your favorite Laserdisc related YouTube channels. I'm sure we watch some of the same people, but there's got to be a hidden gem of a small channel out there. It's tough because there aren't that many people that continually cover Laserdisc. Sometimes people will do like a burst and then run out of material. But in terms of back catalog, Cessna Ace is definitely one channel I've been watching since before I was making videos, and one of the ones that inspired me. Because he, just collected everything and just went through and gave a lot of information that's from the Laserdisc database and just interesting things about pressings and a lot of details in his video, which I appreciated. And then he disappeared for quite some time and came back, and now he's mostly doing video games and comic book collections, probably because he has every Laserdisc known to man already. But it was funny, I don't think he realized how much the Laserdisc community had fell in love with his videos, because everybody was asking about Laserdisc. He's like, I just do Atari stuff now. All these questions about Laserdiscs, and we're like, yes, Laserdiscs. So yeah, his stuff, and then obviously Zarin Isaac's videos on Laserdisc. But again, he doesn't really cover the topic as much now. He was in the LDF for a little bit, but Sean. But yeah, I mean, he's mostly getting Blu-rays and stuff now, and still has some of his favorite Laserdiscs. And there's a great set of videos where he goes through the remaining LDs in his trunk of videos. And he does have like a video about the format itself and how underappreciated it is, and that's classic. And then occasionally, he'll delve in for like little spotlights here and there. But last I knew, his player wasn't working either. And of course, all of us laser nerds are like, we'll fix it for you. We'll tell you what to do. And he's really, probably that's not on his list of like ultimate concerns. But but yeah, so Zarin Isaac, Cessna Ace. But then there was a bunch of other people that would do like a burst of LD videos for a period there. There was a guy, I forgot his name, but his name was Jason, and he was someone that got out of collecting. So there's like a video of his, the last vestiges of his Laserdisc collection. That's great. I wish I could remember the channel names. There was a guy from Hawaii that got a bunch of discs, and he had like a good like 4 or 5 videos, and I watched those all. And then there's Steve Vincent Furness, who was also a Cessna Ace fan, has a lot of great film noir content and Blu-ray and stuff like that. But he's got a decent backlog of LD pickups as well, and it's just a really cool guy. So I heartily recommend checking out his channel. And then again, not LD specific, but of course I got to mention my buddy Daisuke Beppu, who has a comprehensive list of Laserdisc from the Criterion collection. He's got the entire collection, and also the Voyager discs as well. So if you, I think he's even got them in a playlist properly, and he's got different versions too, where it's broken up, or there's like one like mega video where he shows you the entire collection. So definitely check those out, especially if you're into the Criterion collection. I'm guessing Stefan probably is already a fan of Daisuke's channel, but shout outs to Daisuke Beppu, and who else? But yeah, a bunch of kids that used to have collections, and I don't even know if they do anymore. That's how I got into Wasting Money 1, because there was one video where they were in the basement and like just kind of digging through all the family laser discs that were in there, and so that was cool. There's also a couple archival videos that are amazing, like the John Rotan from LDF has a video of a little PC put together in the 90s about the format, but it features video stores like stocking shelves with laser discs and talking about the format at the time in the early 90s and talking about Sony players and stuff like that. That's amazing slice of time stuff. Also, the Tower Records videos. There's one that says, I think it says 1990, but it's really from 1993. There's 2 videos in that, and there's the one guy, was it Ira Galen? Was doing some sort of video series, like a video magazine back in the 90s, and he's got 2 videos on YouTube, which are employees of Tower Records in New York, taking you on a tour of some sorts, and one has a ton of Laserdisc content in it, and is amazing stuff. Kabazuchi Boom's got a ton of older Laserdisc videos. I used to watch those before I started my channel as well. Christian Hannah Horror's also got a decent amount of Laserdisc material, and still collects and has some either like series recaps or he's got a couple like full collection videos going around. So definitely search those out. And I'm sure I'm missing something, but if there's Laserdisc in the title somewhere or in the meta tags, I've probably found it and watched it at some point. But if I think of more, I'll add them in the list or layer them over the video or something. So yeah, great question. And Stefan also asked, when looking for a new LD player, what is your number one concern? High quality playback or features, or durability of the model of the player, etc. Yeah, it's kind of a mixed bag. One, like there's always the search for something with the highest return on investment in terms of video quality. Audio quality is just pretty much badass across the playing field, and it depends on where I'm watching it. It doesn't matter as much if I'm watching it on like a small TV in a bedroom or something. If it has optical out or multiple audio outs, I'm usually just okay with composite RCA jacks going out. So that I definitely don't mind like a older 80s player that doesn't obviously have AC3 RF out or anything like that if I'm not watching in my big system. So my big system, I definitely prefer something that has AC3 RF out, has either optical or coaxial digital out, and also analog out, which everything will. It is cool-ish if it has the trick play digital features, but it's so funny outside of the 90s how little that matters. Like there isn't as much need to freeze frame through CLV discs. That's not usually part of the lure of Laserdisc nowadays. It's a nice little icing on the cake, but not anything I would definitely base a purchasing decision on. But yeah, definitely the audio like Swiss Army knife scenario there, where I need to have multiple different outputs if it's going into the main rig, because I want to be able to listen to AC3 discs in there. It's the only thing keeping my Quasar out of the main rig. So if I will mod that for AC3 eventually, then it would probably go in there. But then the other side factors are, as I've had different players, double-sided play is cool, especially if it's in the main rig. But again, I don't mind single-sided players at all. I grew up on Laserdisc with a single-sided player, and I actually almost prefer it if I'm watching it like if late at night in a bedroom or something like that, because then I don't have to worry about the movie playing interminably. I can watch one side and fall asleep at the end of the side and then wake up, and yeah, it's done. And I don't mind getting up to flip sides or swap discs or anything like that. So yeah, that's kind of a concern. And model, manufacturer doesn't matter as much. I'm not like it's got to be Pioneer or bust guy. And now it's kind of getting more into the terms of unique. It should be something interesting or unique. Finally got my first Japanese player, which requires a step down converter. And I also finally got something, I can't really talk about it yet because I haven't unveiled it yet. But yeah, so it's usually just something unique that I'm looking for now. So there's the path to the HLD X9 and the XO, which, I just want to progress as far on that path as I can financially achieve, which is probably going to stop short of an X9 or an XO. So there's that path. And then along the other way, just anything that's of interest to me, or a unique like design or faceplate or something like that. So so there's some players that I want to get. Then I have more of like a kind of tactical, useful purpose for, and then some players I just want to get for fun or curiosity factor or for their uniqueness. So there's that kind of angle. So I guess that is a long-winded, squishy answer to your question. Thanks for writing in. What else we got? Acid Green asked, for the question, I'll do a twist on the standard one. What Laserdisc player is your favorite and why? For follow-up, what is your least favorite? So favorite out of the ones I own is a tough one because it's going to probably be a three-way tie for different reasons. And then, yeah, none of these players are actually in my main system, so they don't meet the requirements to be included in the main system. But the Quasar LD700, which is just a dream player. One, it's rare as hell. It's almost impossible to find a copy. They come up on eBay once every, 4 or 5 years. But usually when they do, they're in great condition. So that's a nice factor. But it's a rebranded Panasonic LX900, but without the issues of the LX900. There's some models of that player before 1994, September-ish maybe, that have a gain control bugs. The black levels get wonky on you, which can be overcome. And it was overcome when that was implemented in some boutique players. MSB did some variations and did for Runco the LJR2, which added AC3 into the mix as well. And some people say that MSB used some Quasar LD700s in the making of some of those Runco LJR2s. But yeah, so this doesn't have that bug, and also the 900 is missing a portion. There's some scan lines missing, so there's a portion of the image that's actually missing, and the Quasar doesn't have that problem. So on the bottom side, though, if there's one Achilles heel of Panasonic players, is that eventually the lasers get weak and you start to lose elements of the digital audio playback. So first you'll notice DTS discs start to go crappy, and then you'll notice that digital PCM discs start to go crappy, and analog audio usually will sound great throughout that. So there's that potential drawback, but otherwise it's great. And it doesn't have the total, it's got more of a grayish look to it, so it doesn't have that total black Pioneer look. And then so out of my players, because I would love to have an LDS2 or an X1, but out of mine I only have an LDS1. But that is a favorite, and it's a rare one because it's a late 80s player, and I don't usually dabble in 80s players. I'm usually a 90s guy. only 80s Joel. So yeah, that one's from 88, and it's the first of many. It's kind of like a tease of what became the Elite line. So it's got glossy finish. It's got a super heavy I don't know if it's copper bottom plate, and just heavy and designed for quality, like not designed for just like mass market cheapness. It's a beautiful player, and it just plays like a champ, and it's a little like kind of goofy, retro, hokey, retro elegant, but it's just awesome. Yeah, and it's got the nice, beautiful wood side panels, and it just plays like a champ, and it looks great on my old CRT TV, and it's nice. It's my my go-to late night player. So there's that, and then there's the one that will always be near and dear to my heart, which is the Sony MDP-333, which I bought in 1993, which is my first player, and I also love it because people hate it, and people talk trash about Sonys all the time, but in spite of the hatred, all my Sony players that I have, except for maybe one, are working fantastically. And so yeah, it still works to this day, and it's always going to be in some way my favorite player, just because it was my first. And so those three players are now my favorite players, even though they're not in my main system. Least favorite player is none I own. There's none that I own that I actively dislike. So if they were least favorite, it'd just be like, that, like, so there wouldn't be one that would be hated or anything like that. But yeah, for least favorite, I guess if I was to avoid one, and when I was going out buying, I would probably avoid a 5 CD changer from Pioneer, because those tend to crap out because of the complicated arm for the changer system. I don't really actively seek out those kind of gaudy karaoke decks, and I get a lot of joy out of trashing the Macintosh high-end rebrand of the Pioneer CLD 97, because I don't like the goofy chiclet buttons on it, and while some of the Macintosh styling on it looks elegant, a lot of it just looks really crappy and cheesy and hokey. And I think the CLD 97 already is a more stylish and elegant player already, even though it would be nice to have the little added gewgaws and ding-dongs and stuff that Macintosh added to the table. But it's totally a Baxter's Procrustes thing. People that are super high-end video files and audio files, Macintosh could literally come out with a turd with a blue light on it, and people would be like, just lavishing praise upon it and talking about how it's the best element of their house and the artistic and amazing nature of this thing. And you're like, no, that's a turd. And they'll be like, no, it's not. It's a Macintosh. So I love kind of pissing in the Macintosh pool. But that's it. I genuinely dislike the faceplate of the MLD. I always forget the name of it, but 7020 or whatever the hell that is. But it's a CLD 97 in disguise. And then, I haven't picked up any of the industrial players, but they do seem to work rather well. If anything else I would avoid would be early 80s player, because I don't really want to deal with like the Heaney laser, the helium neon lasers. I don't want to deal with anything that doesn't have digital sound. So anything made pre-1984, basically. So there you go. Long answer, as always. Who else is up next? So Jonathan McKnight I've heard you mention seeing quite a few movies in the theaters over the year. Curious to hear what are some of your worst experiences, especially in regard to technical problems with the sound projection or maybe really annoying people in the theater. I haven't had too many film experiences like completely ruined. There's been a few moments. I did walk out of a screening from Crash just because there was some obnoxious old people that were just talking nonstop behind me, and just there was like a running commentary from old people. That was a weird, interesting screening, anyways, and just the Paul Haggis screenplay was already annoying me at that point. I don't generally walk out of films, so there was that. So I guess that was technically ruined by the audience, and there's been memorable moments where I've actually interacted with the audience to either kick them out or tell them to shut up. And I could tell those stories somewhere else because they're pretty long-winded again, as always. But they didn't actually ruin my full enjoyment of the movie. There was just more of a hiccup. And I've been to a few screenings where the screening was disrupted. I've only been to a few times where the film print melted or broke. The most recent one was probably a screening of There Will Be Blood on 35mm, and the print snapped or something, and it took a while. It took a while to get it going again. And I had a screening of Moulin Rouge cut short because of it wasn't a fire alarm, but it was some sort of bomb threat or something like that, and they had to kick everybody out of the movie theater, and they did let us go back in eventually and finish it. In terms of actually ruining it, probably when I saw The Italian Job, the sound went out completely for the finale of the film. So yeah, that was everything. Ed Norton's going to tell you his master plan, and you're going to see how everybody tricks everybody else and all that stuff, and it was just all done in pantomime. So yeah, that sucked. And yeah, the manager wasn't really too thrilled with giving out refund tickets because of it either. And we're like, well, yeah, just give me a ticket, buddy, because I actually want to see the end of this freaking movie. And I actually didn't until it came out on DVD. I didn't know exactly what happened or what the conversations were about. I also saw, what else? Into the Wild. There was some characters that were in there we had to kick out. There was some talking people during Miami Vice and Willard. Print damage. I saw some really bad screenings of Fight Club and 1 Hour Photo with huge colorful scratches that went the entire film. That is one thing I definitely enjoy about digital film. Cinema in 35mm is fantastic, but if it's bad, it's bad. And as these things made their rounds, poor projectionists or just happenstance would create these damaged prints, and they would keep running them. And a lot of times too, by the time you got to 99-cent theaters, for the second run, they were pretty well manhandled and damaged. That's it. Not always. And if it was just some mild pops or things here and there, I could totally deal with it. But it was like those giant, like green stripes running throughout. Like, yeah, that really marred like my Fight Club experience. One of the times I saw it in the theater, and yeah, 1 hour photo at this nice art house theater. And these weren't second run experiences. This was when the films had come out and were being shown to me first run. And yeah, this one art house cinema in Hartford, just I don't know, for some reason they ended up trashing a lot of prints. I had a lot of bad experience there. And then other audio wise, I do, sadly, at one of my favorite cinemas, I saw Quantum of Solace there, and the audio was just really just sizzled and weird. Something was going on. I don't think it was blown speakers, but something happened, and it just sounded horrible, and it didn't have any impact, and it just weakened the overall experience. And I also saw Osamu Tezuka's Metropolis there, and the subtitles were like had video static noise all over them, and they were really difficult to read throughout. That was super annoying. What else? Oh, and then of course like traditional laser pointer action in the late 90s that hit really big. The knucklehead with the laser pointer in the back of the theater that thought he was inventing the wheel by annoying cinema goers by pointing lasers at the screen. That was a huge problem in the late 90s, and I remember seeing Blade and wishing Wesley Snipes would kick through the wall and decapitate that dude. So yeah, there's a bit of everything in there, but yeah, nothing too destructive or where a film broke halfway through and I never got to see the rest of it or anything like that, but some annoyances for sure. Kabazutra Boom, who I mentioned before, asked a bunch of things. When I have a Laserdisc that has been opened but a shrink wrap on it, is it safe or even worth it to keep it on? Yeah, again, shrink wrap is for collectors. A lot of people don't like to keep it on because it literally shrinks over time. And American Laserdisc jackets are a lot weaker than the Japanese counterparts, and Japanese discs don't usually use shrink wrap anyways. They've got looser fitting plastic bags, which are very nice. So yeah, you got to shrink up, especially on a single disc that's not like a thick gatefold, and over time it just pulls those corners in and stresses them and causes the stress fractures, those little bends. So yeah, but once you've slit the disc, that will theoretically, to take out the disc, you slit the side or something, it'll allow it to breathe and allow that pressure to be released a little bit. So I guess it's not as harmful to leave the wrap on, because I think that pressure is not going to be as damaging to the jacket at that point. Generally, it's if I don't plan on keeping it, I'll keep the shrink wrap on. I know Cessna says as a collector, if he receives a disc shrink wrapped, that it's his duty almost as a museum curator to leave the shrink wrap on it. Whereas I'm more, if the shrink wrap has been on it until it got to me and I'm the end user of this thing, I mean, I don't care if maybe I pass on and my wife gives my lasers to somebody else, that's something else. But I'm intending to keep this and watch this for my own. Then I tear it off. It doesn't matter if it's sealed or just cut or whatever, I tear it off, because I don't generally like the look of the cellophane on the disc. I don't know, I'm very finicky about my Laserdisc, like I mentioned before in other videos. I don't even like cloudy LP size. I don't mind putting my LPs in cloudy LP outer sleeves, but something drives me crazy about my LDs. I want to see the jacket art with all the color punch and as smooth and crisp as I can. So I like the polypropylene, the super crystal clear versions of those. So I'd much rather put it in a proper bag. And then yeah, I don't mind the stickers. I think that's always cool when you have an old Tower Records sticker or a hype sticker for THX or AC3, but I would much rather cut those out and stuff them inside or something and just trash the cellophane. So I personally, if I'm planning on keeping it, I would tear the cellophane off, but not out of concern of protecting the jacket. It's probably safe to leave it on if there's already no evidence of it, pulling the corners. and doesn't feel super tight and it's kind of loose, yeah, that's fine. But if I am going to think about selling it or passing it on to someone else, I'll leave the shrink off and I'll let them do that. I'll let them decide. Next question was, I like the Target Blu-ray of Stranger Things where it looks like a VHS cover. Yes. If Laserdisc gets mentioned in Season 4 and it becomes a big thing, do you think Season 4 could be released on Laserdisc? Just curious. Well, probably not on Laserdisc proper because, again, the manufacturing plants don't exist anymore, unlike vinyl where like there was a vinyl lull, but all the means to manufacture records were still available, and the pressing plants still existed. So yeah, you need to make new clean rooms, etc., and it's just cost prohibitive, etc. So there seems to be no future for creating laserdiscs apart from getting the recordable laserdiscs that do exist, but the machines to record them are very hard to find, and you can only do a half an hour on a side, and it's analog only audio and not as good video quality as a regular commercially created disc that's a copy of a master. So there's a lot of those elements at play, but as we've seen before, those large size jackets that they promoted in England, which is funny, I don't think that's Laserdisc nostalgia at all. I think that's just a goofy way of, hey, what if we make vinyl and Blu-ray combined? We could have these 12-inch jackets like vinyl records. I don't think anybody really involved in that marketing campaign was very well aware of Laserdisc. But Laserdisc fans are tending to pick up those Guardians of the Galaxy and Force Awakens Blu-rays and the 12-inch artwork. So it certainly would be possible for like a Target, especially because Target's selling records now too. It would be almost doubly possible for a 12-inch faux Laserdisc Stranger Things release on Blu-ray and DVD and 4K, what have you. The only thing, that's the thing. I'm not sure if it'll get mentioned in the show proper. For some reason, I don't have much faith that the Duffer Brothers are aware of the legacy of Laserdisc, just because they're a little bit younger than my Laserdisc fellow collectors, and that they were introduced to a lot of what Laserdisc is on DVD. And I've even heard them mention on an interview that special features and all that sort of stuff they didn't really think that stuff existed before DVD. So I think they just are aware of VH. They probably know about Laserdisc, but they don't seem to be that cognitively connected to it. And so it's just VHS rolls into DVD and that's it. But that said, there was Dragon's Lair in Stranger Things Season 2, which was a Laserdisc based video game. So we easily could have done a Laserdisc tie-in for Season 2 already. So I would love for a Laserdisc mention as Stranger Things rolls on, especially in Season 4. And there were some great LD players and great LD content in 86 and 87. So as the show progresses, it is possible. But yeah, I don't know if the Duffers are that aware. And I even watched the Beyond Stranger Things series on Netflix for Season 2, hoping, because there was a lot of Dragon's Lair talk, I was like, oh, maybe they're going to talk about Laserdisc, and there was nothing. So I don't think they're tapped into Laserdisc, which is a bummer, because then that means they might not write it into the show, and this whole kind of chain of events we're talking about won't happen. But anyway, so that's my thoughts on that. Does Culturedog Sam Hatch prefer Coke or Pepsi or other? As a kid, I was RC. That was my jam. But I'm actually a Coke guy. I'm Coke. I will drink Pepsi. I do prefer, if I am rocking the Pepsi, to go cherry Pepsi. I'm also Dr. Pepper. I'm hardcore into Dr. Pepper and root beer. But if I'm going for the two, it's probably Coke. And when I was a club kid in the 90s, I used to always stop and get a Jones Cola on the way home before they kind of broke out a little bit bigger. So I used to rock a lot of Jones Cola. And there's a lot of great little small kind of like soda creators in my neck of the woods too. But out of the two, I lean more towards Coke naturally, and the Coke-based products. So there you go. What is the proper way to hook up AC3? There's a couple different variations. Basically, you need something to transform the AC3 audio on the Laserdisc into the AC3 audio that you know and love on DVD and everything beyond. So it's very similar, and any modern receiver, there are a couple problems here and there, but any modern receiver should have the capability to play the 5.1 AC3 on a Laserdisc, because they haven't really mucked with it too much since then. They've added, rear center channel speakers and all sorts of things like that, and expanded to lossless, Dolby Audio, etc. over the years. But you're still going to be able to play the Laserdisc AC3. But if you do that, then you need to get a demodulator in between. So there's that thing, if you don't do a lot of modern viewing, you don't mess around with a lot of modern things, you can get an older receiver that has Dolby Digital in it. So, all right, so here's the weird kind of razor's edge line if you're going old. AC3 came out on Laserdisc in 95, and DTS dropped a couple of years later. So there are a ton of receivers, well, a decent amount of receivers from that 95 and on period that have a RF demodulator built into them, so you could plug in one of those little RF ports on the back of your AC3 Laserdisc player from 1995 and on. You can plug that directly into the receiver and just get Dolby Digital. But then if you also want DTS, if you have DTS discs, then that's going to limit you to a later receiver, because DTS didn't start getting added to receivers until the late 90s. So there's a very smaller kind of crossover period. And there's a gorgeous Pioneer player that Sean from LDF has. Ask him about it, Sean Gillette. He's got one that's got the Dolby Digital RF demodulator built in and DTS. So it's a lot easier and a lot more compatible, especially if you're just playing a lot of newer stuff and you want HDMI inputs and stuff like that, to get a modern receiver and get a standalone demodulator to sit between the Laserdisc player and the receiver. And all it is a little box, basically, and it takes there's the AC3 audio is encoded in a radio frequency in the FM wavelength on the disc itself. So it's pretty amazing when the laser bounces back from the surface of the disc. It's in a FM signal, and it's got all these different, all the kind of carrier frequencies in there have different stuff. So there's like a section with analog audio, and there's a section with analog video, and then there's a section with digital audio. So the way they were able to squeeze 5.1 AC3 on the disc was to steal the space for one of the analog audio tracks and put the digital info in there. But so now it's still in that analog RF frequency kind of form as it's coming out of the player. So you need something to turn it into regular old Dolby Digital bits, that anything digital and modern will be able to understand. So you need a little box, and it's a pretty simple box. It's nothing amazing, but because they're so important, they tend to go for a lot of money. So you're usually talking about at least $100 on eBay. And historically, they've always been. So I think I paid about $100 for my new back in the late 90s. So you just need to find one of those little boxes to go. And it's just like a regular coaxial audio cable, or a 75 ohm cable. So just get a big, beefy cable to go into one of those. And there's different variations of those demodulator boxes. Some do more things. Some will pass through other audio as well. And some are very simple, like my Sony, which is just in and out. And the out gives you the choice of Toslink optical out or coaxial digital out. So you can choose which one, but it's very simple. But yeah, you can find one of those. It makes your life a lot easier, and it gives you a lot more play for mixing Laserdisc in with other elements like Blu-ray and stuff like that. But if you can find one of those older receivers with the RF, RF AC3 in port, then you're pretty golden. If you're just into Laserdisc, for sure. So a couple options there for you. Next up is your thoughts on the future of physical media. Do you think 4K Blu-rays will last? I'm intrigued about the future of 4K in particular, and it's already shaping up to be an interesting situation as all these boutique companies are getting access to catalog titles from studios that don't want to bother releasing their own catalog titles anymore. So it's becoming more Laserdisc-y in terms of the the Vinegar Syndromes and the Shout Factories and stuff. It's almost like Roan Group and Elite and all those guys that were doing all these kind of cult, interesting Laserdiscs. they're already kind of taking over Blu-ray in one aspect, but then it's just the big Hollywood product is getting pushed as Blu-ray and 4K. So as streaming becomes more and more of a thing, there's definitely more of a tendency for that to disappear and for them just to start releasing things digitally. So if anything, it's going more niche, but I am intrigued to see how prolonged the mainstream marketing of UHDs and Blu-rays can survive. That's the interesting. But I have a feeling that UHDs and traditional Blu-rays are going to hang on for a bit as a niche media. So all these boutique vendors aren't going to go away. So yeah, it may go full like Laserdisc and be this more obscure thing for people that aren't cool enough to embrace digital all the way and just want to have these stupid discs in their collection. But yeah, there's going to be less and less of a draw for Joe Sixpack, so to speak, to pick up a UHD player. So there's going to be a lot of UHD vendors forcing that down people's throats that don't necessarily want it. So it'll eventually settle into a situation where the collectors that do want it are going to get access to it, but it may be on a smaller level. But yeah, I'm interested to see how this all plays out. Then what else? So I think that was it for Kabazuchi Boom. Thanks for writing in those awesome questions. Jason Floyd asks, what about upscaling? I'd love to find the best way to play on my 1080p DLP and on one 4K I get one. And yeah, upscaling is a whole other bag. I got to do some videos on it in particular. And I know Laserdisc Home Theater, he doesn't even like using the word upscaling because upscaling is just one of many factors with watching Laserdiscs on a digital display. And it's weird because there's a war that's not going to stop, and especially as more people are coming at Laserdisc from more of a retro media perspective of it being outdated and that's what they like about it. So there's going to be a group of people that aren't going to want to watch anything outside of what it was like back in the day, and then there's going to be people that are going to be the next generation of the people. Because when I was collecting Laserdisc back in the day, people weren't just like super enthusiasts weren't just satisfied with watching it on whatever 27-inch TV they got it they got from JCPenney or whatever. There was a big impetus to run these things through line doublers and get Runco projectors, and there was the stuff that people are doing now is exactly the same sort of stuff people were doing in the 90s. So in that terms, it's almost like there's like a VHS crowd that's coming at Laserdisc and trying to. So it's funny because the VHS crowd coming at Laserdisc is always screaming at the people that are trying to run it through like 4K TVs or whatever as to trying to make it into Blu-ray, which is not what anybody's trying to do. They're just trying to get the best out of the format they can and make it play as well with the modern equipment as it can or is possible of. But I always accuse those guys of making Laserdisc VHS because that's not what it was. It's not really how it was back in the day or how it was perceived. There's plenty of discs out there that are VHS. I call them VHS Plus. They're really not that much better than a VHS Master, etc. But there's a lot of great stuff that's letterboxed and is interesting and fun to kind of play on a modern TV. So that said, I'm not against processing the signal, but the things that you end up doing to it are also the things that play it. Like all the players from the mid 90s for the most part all had digital manipulation built into the player. So it's weird, people have a knee-jerk reaction to a lot of these elements like comb filters, upscalers, deinterlacers, and they're just and noise reduction. But these things are part of the process. Like at least the comb filter in particular is just part of watching a Laserdisc on a TV. Old TVs have the comb filters built into them. The Laserdisc players have the comb filters built into them. If you're using a device outside of it to do it, it's no different. But there's this weird, bizarre, twisted perception that if you have an external device, you're doing something impure to the signal that is not done when you plug in. So there's a lot of people, I plug in direct, and so, well, congratulations. You're plugging in directly to something that has a comb filter, an upscaler, a deinterlacer, and noise reduction. You're not bypassing anything, and you're not maintaining any kind of level of purity. So the question is always, what does it better? So with a modern TV, there are a lot of TVs. I've got a Sharp 4K, a cheap, probably made by Hisense or whatever, but a cheap 4K panel, and it's got a freaking composite video jack right on the back of it. There's a lot of older models that have component jacks and inputs with the green input that also doubles as a yellow composite. So you might want to look into that. Always try and plug directly and see if that goes. And a lot of people think that proves some sort of purity of signal. And it's like, no, that proves that the combination of the comb filter and the upscaler and deinterlacer in your television is doing a good job. The comb filter in your player may be better, so in that case you'd use the S-Video port out of the player. But the general rule of thumb is that anything made newer than your player probably has a better comb filter in it than your player does. But it always pays off to give it a shot and experiment. So upscaling is, it's a part of the process, and it's something your TV will do if you have an old composite input. Like, you're still upscaling, you're not bypassing that. Whether or not you want to get something in a processor standalone to do it for you is something else. So then that whole can of worms gets opened with the cheap ones, the little Chinese knockoffs that will also pull your 4:3 Laserdiscs to 16:9, and a lot of times create a situation where it'll pump it out via HDMI, but your TV, because some TVs get a little funky with HDMI, and some TVs will not allow you to shrink or expand or manipulate the image if it's being fed from HDMI. So you get these things, and it pulls the image like taffy automatically, and you can't scale it properly or pull the dimensions and zoom properly. Or just watch it with the bars on the side if you're watching an old 4:3 film, like Casablanca or something like that. You should have pillar boxes on the sides, so you have no control over that, and they generally do a poor job. There's also a big portion of the gaming community that's coming at Laserdisc as inseparable from gaming, which is not. There was a laser active, yes, but FrameMeister isn't necessarily the way to go with Laserdisc. So what's good for gaming isn't necessarily good for Laserdisc. So people need to figure that out. And it seems to be getting worse. People are coming at Laserdisc more as gaming adjacent, probably because of the laser active. But it has its own unique needs, and those are not met by a lot of gaming devices for watching and playing games on newer devices. Then you're talking into like, how much money do you want to invest in, and how many devices in your signal chain do you want? Do you want to have something that's a comb filter, and then do you want to have a separate noise reduction machine, and then do you want to have something that scales and deinterlaces, or deinterlaces and scales, as it would go? Do you want to have all those things separate, or do you want to try and get as much in box as possible? And the top dogs, the guys that are doing the most, with it, are dealing with high-end Lumagen units, but then a lot of the people are realizing that there's still some issues with like things like the Cristallo, the CR2, and then also the high-end Lumagen. Like, if you combine those two units, you end up doing better. There's Algolith Mosquito people tend to work with. There's so many options out there. So you're going to have to dig in at the LDF or the LDDB columns and forums and ask some questions and figure out what is right for you. But then on the entry level aspect, there's like the old Extron YCSs people like. I've got a Faruja NRS. You can get those pretty cheaply, and they do a pretty good job. I also have a DVDO Edge Green that a lot of people hate those, but I don't use it for the comb filter, and it does a really good job deinterlacing, actually. So basically there's like around 4-ish components to watching LD on a modern display, and give or take a few, and it's really just a mixture of the best way of achieving that, and it really depends on what you're watching it on, starting with what your inputs are on your display, and what does the best job. and it could be a mixture of multiple components, or it might just be a simple one connection into your TV. So I'll do more videos on that in the future, and I can always kind of lead you in the right direction if you need some more help on that. But that's a basic, long-winded explanation about upscaling. The 8-Track Master wanted to know, what's your favorite Laserdisc player? And I mentioned before, it's a triple whammy of the LDS1, the Sony MDP333, and my Quasar LD700. But I mean, I do also like my LDS9. I wouldn't mind getting a R7G. That seems to be the Japanese player of choice right now. And I wouldn't mind getting some more like weird kind of boutique players, etc. And an LDS2 would be delightful too if I can get my hands on one of those. But that's that. What's your favorite movie on Laserdisc of all time? My favorite movie of all time is Vertigo. So on Vertigo on Laserdisc, I do enjoy that signature collection release. My favorite Laserdisc all the time is my Macross box set, but that's technically a TV show and not a movie. But yeah, if it was like that, like if you're gonna grab a disc and run to a desert island kind of thing, for movies, like I would probably grab Big Trouble in Little China or The Fifth Element. So that would be my choice, or choices. What's my favorite game console of all time? It's tough because I grew up with the VCS. I was an Atari guy and an Atari 5200 guy. But probably the first PlayStation, the PSX, PS1. That was the one I got a ton of use. I did get a ton of use out of my Ataris too as well. But I had actually stepped away from console gaming at that point. So it was strong enough to pull me back in. And I used to love playing Wipeout and, of course, the Final Fantasies and Driver. Driver was my jam on that. Silent Hill. So many games. Yeah, the PlayStation really dragged me back in to something I had stepped away from entirely. So it's even more powerful probably than the Atari, which I wanted, before I even had one. So, yeah, so I'm going with the PlayStation. Do you have any warped discs? Yes, I've got, I had... they actually got damaged, unfortunately. Not related to the warpage, but I had a warped set of Wild Palms box set, so I need to replace that. I got a Pioneer video tuning fork disc, which are very cool, but the guy sent it to me in like a piece of cardboard this big. And it was so big that it had like so much like torque if you like bent the sides, that the disc in the middle just stood no chance. It was super... like multi-warped by the time I got it. And I still have not been able to squeeze that thing back into shape. You can fix warp. Sometimes even just stacking them vertically, with enough pressure over time will fix some mild warpage. But then you can go the more extreme routes of stacking under heavy, which is the official recommendation on the disc sleeves sometimes, and the manuals of the Laserdisc players. I would recommend stacking under like a heavy pile of books, etc. Like maybe between a sandwich between a couple sheets of glass. If you can get some of that, like some cheap glass, or get those like album frames, with the actual glass, you can just punch the glass out and put a disc between them and stack something on them for a while. Or you can go the heat method, put them between glass and either heat up water in a jug and put that on, or just leave it outside in the hot sun if you're in somewhere where you have hot sun or you have a nice summer. So there's a couple different options. But I've got a warped Fifth Element that has a little bit of crosstalk, because usually what warping does, it can cause all sorts of playback errors, but if it's mildish warping, it'll have crosstalk where the laser's reading the frame it needs to read in CLV, and then a bit of the frame before and after, and it causes this weird herringbone pattern. So I've got a copy of Eraser, which has some crosstalk. Strangely, no laser rot, but it does have a little bit of crosstalk because of warping. And a Fifth Element, the video test tuning fork, and Iron Maiden Live After Death, which is too bad because I really need to get that guy straightened out. So I've got those guys. Number 5, do I hate Justin Bieber? Not personally. I don't listen to him, and I don't really get into his jams per se. But I don't wish any harm on him, because he's just doing his thing, and was young and foolish. Now he's young adult and foolish, possibly. But yeah, I don't actually devote any of my time to Justin Bieber. So I definitely wouldn't want to hate him, because that would be extra time I would be devoting just to hating Justin Bieber. But yeah, and since I don't actually actively have to encounter him, his songs, hit or miss, definitely don't impact my life. So it's not like a case of if I was subjected to his stuff, I might actively hate him if I didn't like the songs. So yeah, so that's the short answer for that one. Who's your favorite Marvel hero? Spider-Man, for sure. I was hard into the late 70s Spider-Man comics. I got a bunch from my dad, and I used to just read the crap out of those things. So I loved a lot of other Marvel characters throughout time, but Spider-Man was definitely number one. And what's your favorite anime? Macross, Super Dimension Fortress Macross is the one that dragged me in. It's the one, the lure, the mysterious muse that I heard about it at first. I saw glimpses of it, and then when I finally saw it through the Robotech incarnation here in the States, I fell in love with it, but still yearned to seek out the original, and did. And now I've got multiple copies of it in multiple formats, and it's just a space opera, and it's got transforming robots. It's got some goofy elements, like the concept of aliens being, I guess it's not totally goofy, but being horrified by human culture, in particular singing. But so it's kind of goofy, where like, J-pop is a way to defeat aliens. So it's got a little bit of goofiness in its DNA, but the character designs are great. The mecha designs are great. The story is epic and huge and sprawling. And yeah, it's still always my favorite. Cowboy Bebop would be a competitor along with Dirty Pair, but that's number one. And do you like the top 149 memes in under 300 seconds? I'm actually I'm familiar with memes, but I'm not familiar with that particular celebration of memes. So I guess the answer is no. I don't dislike it either. I'm just not familiar. And then DI dropped some questions, or at least one. With longtime viewer here, my question is top 10 metal bands or albums you pick. It's tough, because definitely if we're going with bands I've seen the most, that makes it a little bit easier. Straight off the bat, there's Metallica, Opeth, Mastodon. I haven't seen them, but Black Sabbath is obviously one of my favorite metal bands, because they're seminal. Carcass would be in there, so that's 5 right there. Gojira is one of my favorites. Tons of thrash metal bands. Oh yeah, Slayer's on there for sure. We'll go a little aside just because I collect the crap out of them. A band called The Vision Bleak, which is like a mix of Typo Negative, Sisters of Mercy, and the Metallica Black Album. And I love those guys, so I'm going to give them a shout out because I love them. And what else? What else are we going to throw down? Let's throw down, let's give some love for Death, Chuck Schuldiner. But then tons of more metal bands, obviously, as well. But best albums, obviously Master of Puppets, Rain and Blood, Necroticism Descanting the Insularius from Carcass, from those bands, particularly Blackwater Park from Opeth, though I do love a lot of Opeth albums. Slaughter of the Soul from At the Gates. It's tough, like Chaos ID tied with Arise for Sepultura. Bloody Kisses tied with October Rust for Typo Negative. Master of Reality for Black Sabbath. That's it for now. So yeah, that's kind of the metal pile. Sir Stuart Wallace has a question. What's the most disappointed you've ever been with a Laserdisc? Probably when I picked up Godzilla vs. Biollante, which I was excited because I had never seen any Godzilla films outside of the original, the Showa period, the original batch up until, Godzilla vs. Megalon. And I had never seen, obviously, they had 1984, I had seen that, or Godzilla 85, whichever way you come at it. But I was excited about the newer Godzilla films. I was seeing, books at stores that trucked in anime and models and nerddom and all that stuff. So I had seen evidence of these newer films, but I hadn't seen any of them. But I was excited to see like Godzilla from modern filmmaking perspectives, and Dimension Films or Miramax or HBO, one of them, or some mixture of the three, got the rights for Godzilla vs. Biollante and put it out on Laserdisc. So I picked it up, and this was back in the Laserdisc era, so you were dumping, a decent amount of coin, and something like this wasn't that expensive, maybe $30-$40 at the most, but I don't think it was probably more like $30-$35. So I picked up Godzilla vs. Biollante, and I was like, yes. And then I got home, and the audio quality was just so shrill that I almost couldn't watch it. I did watch it that once, but I never revisited it just because I remembered how horrible it was listening to that disc. So that's probably the worst, because I spent, my hard-earned money on it, and the immediate, the return on investment was so poor that I was just like, I got duped. So that's it. I mean, there's been some other ones where, it was like the movie wasn't as good as I anticipated, or the video quality wasn't as good as I anticipated. But then over the years, too, some of the discs that I thought were too noisy end up looking pretty good on my rig, which has good noise reduction, etc. So, at the time, I was a little bit disappointed with Shallow Grave, Sony's Bram Stoker's Dracula, and like No Escape, but with some good noise reduction, they actually don't look that bad. But then I still would watch those videos all the time too, in spite of the chroma noise and stuff I was seeing. So, but yeah, definitely that Godzilla vs. Biollante. And Bill, Operation Bill, help Bill out. All right, I'm new to Laserdisc. I ordered the R7G. Oh man, nice. I told you everybody's getting the R7G now. I have a JVC model number LT32X576 television. I have a few Laserdisc movies. Is this a decent combination? Meaning, will it be adequate to enjoy a Laserdisc movie on? If not, how to improve? It's tough because I believe that is an older LCD TV. And LCD seems to be, especially the older TV seems to be the one sticking point for watching LD on modern displays, where Laserdisc can look excessively like crayon-like and washed out or smeary on LCDs. So your results may vary. It depends on that particular model, which I haven't had experience on. That said, I have watched LDs on an older Samsung from a good 10, 11 years ago, and it didn't really look that bad. But yeah, I have seen just naturally LD seems to play nicer with plasma, and the newer 4K sets, it looks great on. So OLEDs and all that stuff, or even my cheap 4K Sharp LCD, it seems to look, there's a really nice contrast punch to it. So older LCD is definitely treacherous territory for mixing with LD. So and how involved you want to get in bettering that, your results, your efforts might not be rewarded that much, aside from getting a new display. And obviously, if you don't want to get a new display, that doesn't make sense to get one just to make LD look better. But there's a couple things you can do if you can't plug in directly. You can get an old DVD recorder that's got either component out or HDMI out. People tend to like the Panasonic DMR ES25. It's a good cheap way to not only get a decent comb filter, but also to output to something that can accept either a component input or HDMI input, or accept an output. So that there's that option. If you want to get involved in processors, I wouldn't really necessarily recommend it with an older, smaller LCD screen. I'd probably just try and get something as simple as possible to solve any issues with scaling or stretching the image erratically. So maybe an older DVD-O unit or something like that might give you a little bit of a boost, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend getting any deeper past a DVD-O. And there's different units that people like more. People tend to like the Duo, the Best of All, the VP50 Pro, some people like. I've got a DVD-O Edge Green, which I do enjoy, but you can get some pretty cheap. So, But then again, you might be able to find a Veruja NRS and get one that outputs to an acceptable resolution that your TV would take. So that's a possibility too, but it gets a little more complicated in those regards. But the other option too is if you do get the like something that will transcode it into something digital, like that Panasonic DVD recorder, then you can try also throwing S-Video, depending on your, what was your player? R7G. So yeah, you could also take the S-Video out of the R7G and run that through and just use the DVD recorder as a pass-through and see if the recorder does a better job as a comb filter or the player. And then it'll still upscale it and pump it out through the HDMI output. So you've got some options. So that might be like a good way to go about things. If you can get your hands on a Panasonic DMR ES25, give that a shot. And then I currently have no surround sound system other than the speaker and the TV. I may want to take the movie experience to the next level. What's a good durable setup? And surround sound is another sticking point. I know there's some among us, like my buddy Moikey, who initially balked at the idea of wires. I know he doesn't like wires, so it depends on how averse to wires you are. So yeah, you may want to go simpler and just go for a big boxy sound bar, which, that said, they aren't bad, and they're better than what's coming out of most TVs. So yeah, you can go soundbar if you want. There's a couple cheaper like home theater in a box options. But that said, if you want to get into like 5.1 surround sound or something, the local marketplaces, because the market is flooded with them. You can get a little bit older if you don't mind not having Dolby Atmos or the current best and biggest thing. You could fire up either Craigslist, or if you're in Canada, Kijiji or something like that, or Facebook Marketplace, and it's not even a case where any one particular thing is getting raised up because of hipsters or anything like that. There's just so much of the stuff out there that the market is forced to maintain its reasonable nature. So yeah, maybe if somebody's hustling something from a particular brand that's hot or something, but there's a lot of really good gear that'll do 5.1 surround sound rather well, with a lot of inputs and just crazy amounts of stuff, and great speakers and stuff out there for a super cheap price. So that's like, if I was just going to go simple and fast, I would definitely search up some local sales and pick something killer out for next to nothing. So there you go. Thanks for writing that in, and hopefully we have helped Bill out, because that is the mission plan. I think that's everything. I think we got everyone covered. Sorry for the immense length of this video, but yeah, I think we got it all covered for the most part. Thanks to everybody for writing in and participating. And if there's something I missed, write it below. Maybe I can at least type an answer to you or help you out in some sort of fashion, or save something for a future Q&A. But yeah, thanks for everybody for watching lately, and the feedback with the cool 80s top 10 videos, how everyone's been interested in that. And there was a lot of great feedback with my recent Laserdisc pickups collection video that one seemed to go over like gangbusters. So it's been fun. It's been awesome being able to kind of push out content at a faster rate lately, and just interact with everybody. So cheers, and I'll see you guys soon, either on a live stream or in the comments below in a hot minute. So cheers, peace.